verses 1 through 34. 1 Kings 13, beginning in verse 1. And behold, there came a man of God out of Judah by the word of the Lord unto Bethel. And Jeroboam stood by the altar to burn incense. And he cried against the altar in the word of the Lord, and said, O altar, altar, thus saith the Lord, Behold, a child shall be born unto the house of David, Josiah by name, and upon thee shall he offer the priests of the high places that burn incense upon thee, and men's bones shall be burnt upon thee. And he gave a sign the same day, saying, This is a sign which the Lord hath spoken. Behold, the altar shall be rent, and the ashes that are upon it shall be poured out. And it came to pass, when King Jeroboam heard the saying of the man of God, which he had cried against the altar in Bethel, that he put forth his hand from the altar, saying, Lay hold on him. And his hand, which he put forth against him, dried up, so that he could not pull it in again to him. The altar also was rent, and the ashes poured out from the altar, according to the sign which the man of God had given by the word of the Lord. And the king answered and said unto the man of God, Entreat now the face of the Lord thy God, and pray for me, that my hand may be restored me again. And the man and the man of God besought the Lord, and the king's hand was restored him. And again, and it became as it was before. And the king said unto the man of God, Come home with me, and refresh thyself, and I will give thee a reward. And the man of God said unto the king, If thou wilt give me half thine house, I will not go in with thee. Neither will I eat bread nor drink water in this place. For so was charged it me by the word of the Lord, saying, Eat no bread, nor drink water, nor turn again by the same way that thou camest. So he went another way, and returned not by the way that he came to Bethel. Now there dwelt an old prophet in Bethel, and his sons came and told him all that the works that the man of God had done that day in Bethel. The words which he had spoken unto the king, them told also to their father. And their father said unto them, What way went he? For his sons had seen what way the man of God went, which came from Judah. And he said to his sons, Saddle me the ass. So they saddled him the ass, and he rode thereon. And he went after the man of God, and found him sitting under an oak. And he said unto them, Art thou the man of God that camest from Judah? And he said, I am. Then he said unto him, Come home with me, and eat bread. And he said, I may not return with thee, nor go in with thee, neither will I eat bread, nor drink water with thee in this place. For it was said me by the word of the Lord, Thou shalt eat no bread, nor drink water there, nor turn again to go the way that thou camest. And he said unto him, I am a prophet also, as thou art. And an angel spake unto me by the word of the Lord, saying, Bring him back with thee into thine house, that he may eat bread and drink water. But he lied unto him. So he went back with him, and did eat bread in his house, and drank water. And it came to pass, as they sat at the table, that the word of the Lord came unto the prophet that brought him back. And he cried unto the man of God that came from Judah, saying, Thus saith the Lord, Forasmuch as thou hast disobeyed the mouth of the Lord, and hast not kept the commandment which the Lord thy God commanded thee, but camest back, and hast eaten bread, and drunk water in this place, of which the Lord did say to thee, Eat no bread, and drink no water, thy carcass shall not come unto the sepulchre of thy father. And it came to pass, after he had eaten bread, and after he had drunk, that he saddled for him the ass, to wit, for the prophet whom he had brought back. And when he was gone, a lion met him by the way, and slew him, and his carcass was cast in the way. And the ass stood by it. The lion also stood by the carcass. standing by the carcass. And they came and told it in the city where the old prophet dwelt. And when the prophet that brought him back from the way heard thereof, he said, It is the man of God, who was disobedient unto the word of the Lord. Therefore the Lord hath delivered him unto the lion, which hath torn him and slain him, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake unto him. And he spake to his sons, saying, Saddle me the ass. And they saddled him. And he went and found his carcass cast in the way, and the ass and the lion standing by the carcass. The lion had not eaten the carcass, nor torn the ass. And the prophet took up the carcass of the man of God, and laid it upon the ass, and brought it back. And the old prophet came to the city to mourn and to bury him. And he laid the carcass in his own grave. And they mourned over him, saying, Alas, my brother. And it came to pass, after he had buried him, that he spake to his son, saying, When I am dead, then bury me in the sepulchre wherein the man of God is buried. Lay my bones beside his bones. For the same which he cried by the word of the Lord against the altar in Bethel, and against all the houses of the high places which are in the cities of Samaria, shall surely come to pass. After this thing, Jeroboam returned not from his evil way, but made again of the lowest of the people priests of the high places, whosoever would. He consecrated him, and he became one of the priests of the high places. And this thing became sin unto the house of Jeroboam, even to cut it off, and to destroy it from off the face of the earth. Brian, would you lead us in prayer this morning, please?
Dear God, how great and mighty you are. Thank you for allowing us to come out this morning and worship you. Please be with those who couldn't make it out today, Lord. And I will restore them to you, dear Lord. Dear Lord, please be with one who provides the message today and Sunday school teachers. Jesus, in the precious name we pray. Amen.
And our next hymn this morning is number 208, Love Divine, All Loves Excelling.
Jesus,
morning again. I'd like to welcome everyone out this morning. If we have any guests with us, we want to extend a special welcome and invite you back again as you have opportunity. We also want to welcome those that are joining us over the internet. In the way of announcements, we've received $68,989 for the Fellowship Hall Gym Building Fund. We've also received $522.61 for the Baby Bottle Ministry. So please pray what God would have you to contribute for this vital ministry. We also want to thank everyone who helped pack the military Valentine boxes and all those that provided items for the boxes. We also want to thank everyone that helped in any way at the McDonald Mission Center Thursday. We had a great time. There was some wonderful soup, some wonderful desserts, a good program, and a good turnout. So it was a good time. Good entertainment. Yes. The youth will be meeting Wednesday night at 6:30. And then there's also a Valentine dinner at the Warrensburg Community Club Saturday the 11th from 5 to 7:30. And the cost for that is $10 per person. Also, just some other announcements. Living Joy will be meeting after the morning service briefly, like 5 minutes. So if you please remember that. Also, please continue to pray for Preacher and Angie. They're in Florida, obviously not here today. They have a conference that they're attending, so remember them in prayer and for traveling mercies. Do we have any other prayer requests or announcements?
Remember Tucker for me. He's not feeling too good this morning. He's trying to catch this stuff that's going around and everybody's got, and he's supposed to have his surgery in 2 weeks, so.
Okay, so Tucker Courtney is trying to come down with something, and he's got his surgery in 2 weeks, so he needs that to clear up for that surgery to go forward.
My sister Sharon had a knee replacement on Tuesday, and she's in a lot of pain this week, but she's in therapy, so just keep her in prayer.
Okay, so Diane's sister that had knee replacement surgery, still in a lot of discomfort and therapy for that. Also, the family of Bob Sapp over his passing this week. Also, I have a coworker, her sister, Helen Cook, has cancer, and they're still trying to figure out what to do about that. So remember her in prayer. And then a individual that I used to support, she's 92. Her name is Emma. She fell and broke her shoulder, possibly her wrist and hand, and is going to be probably laid up for at least 3 months on that. So we're hoping that she can get to come home.
Lou Bain's got the Rona, so pray for
Mr.
him
Bain.
and stay away from me.
Mr. Bain possibly has the coronavirus, so remember him in prayer as well. Any others? Okay, then let's sing happy birthday to those with birthdays this week. Sunday school time will begin in just a moment. Unless I can delay it. Good morning. It's a race. This week, we're looking at Lesson 10 in your book. If you don't have a book, there are some on the front pew there that you can help yourself to. Lesson 10 is covering Chapter 8 of John, I Am the Light. Our author starts off talking about the Mammoth Cave systems that are in south central Kentucky. It's it's the largest cave system in the world, over 400 miles of mapped tunnels. And the big thing here is during guided tours, guests can see or not see total darkness because you get down into the caves and they shut the lights off and it's totally dark. The Bible compares our sin-filled world to living in total darkness. This brings back a memory for me when I was younger, probably 8-10 years old, and that was just like 2 years ago. I used to go with my grandparents on vacation out west, and basically I was their gopher for anything that they needed. And one of the things that I always wanted to do was to go into the caves that were advertised on the billboards. They weren't real keen on it because they were my grandparents, so they were older and that just wasn't something that they were up to. But I finally wore them down enough that they decided they were going to let me go on a tour. And they basically charged one of the tour guides with keeping an eye on me and not losing me in the caves. So I got to go on the cave, and I was right behind the guide, going through the thing. And as I did that, of course, I don't know if you've ever done these tours, but there's a lot of really cool stuff to look at in these caves. So it's like I started to dawdle. People were passing me. And then pretty soon I noticed there's no guide. There's no light. I had become separated, and there's all these people following me now. So I'm looking around. It's like, what do I do now? And as I looked around, I finally caught the glimpse of a lantern going by. So it's like, okay, it's that way. And so I'm going towards what I thought was the light, and suddenly the cave got smaller. It was getting shorter and shorter and narrower and narrower. Eventually, I'm on my hands and knees crawling through this tunnel, which fortunately did open up into a larger area where my guide actually was. And our guide explained that there are many different alternate routes that go throughout the cave. And it was like he tried sending folks back to retrieve the rest of the group that was behind me. They're like, no, we want to go this new way. But I was very relieved to see the light. And just like Jesus provides light to our world and to us. So it's like our chapter here shows some contrast between a couple groups. One is at the end of chapter 7. The Pharisees, after they had confronted Jesus in the temple, it says, the Pharisees just went home after their confrontation. But in the first verse of chapter 8, it says that Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. And again, Mount of Olives, this is a place where we hear Jesus going a lot of times to pray, sometimes praying all night. Lose nervous, so bear with me. Sometimes praying all night. The Bible here doesn't tell us whether he prayed or prayed all night. But whatever was going on, Jesus was preparing himself for the next day. He was going to be returning to the temple, dealing with the Pharisees and the leaders there. So this would be a challenge for him and needed to be bathed in prayer. Every day is a challenge for us, or at least for me. However, a lot of times I'll get up and it's like, nothing on the schedule today. I've got this. God, take a break. And then the day just blows up. So again, we need to remember to always go to God, pray, ask for his support. If Jesus needed prayer, how much more do we need prayer? Here, the religious leaders brought a woman in adultery, trying to trap Jesus, discredit him, diminish his popularity with the crowds. They weren't really interested in any kind of justice here. What they were wanting is to find a flaw that they could exploit. Jesus confronts the hypocrisy of the Pharisees, showed compassion to the woman. However, he did not dismiss her sin or make little of it, but rather warned her not to sin anymore. After the accusers left discredited, Jesus addresses the crowd that he had been teaching and says that he's the light of the world. The remaining scribes and Pharisees attacked this declaration because by their tradition, anyone that testified about himself could not be trusted. However, Jesus repeats the validation from God the Father, and these judges lacked basic knowledge of God. And then continuing on, Jesus reflects on a time when he's not going to be with his disciples anymore, talking about the crucifixion, the resurrection, and the ascension. Their worldly attitudes robbed them of any spiritual understanding, and even some of the people in the crowd began to struggle with the idea that of a truth that could set them free. And again, they're thinking more of the Roman oppression and bondage. And then at the end of this chapter, the Jews appealed to their lineage as descendants of Abraham. Again, taking another dig at Jesus and what they perceived as his questionable parentage. But here Jesus responds that Abraham had been given a vision of the Messiah and rejoiced. And then he goes on to reveal that he is the anointed one, the Messiah that Abraham anticipated by using the phrase, I am. And this was uniquely associated with God, and this caused the remaining leaders to become furious as they took up stones to kill him, but he left unharmed. And now we're going to get to the actual passages here. Diane, could you read verses 3 and 4 for me, please?
Then the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery, making her stand in the center. Teacher, they said to him, this woman was caught in the act of committing adultery.
And then Ethan, could you read verses 5 and 6 for us, please?
Yes, sir. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. So what would you say? This they said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground.
And again, in verse 3, we see the Pharisees using hypocrisy to disguise their moral self-righteousness. The scribes and Pharisees wanted to entrap Jesus in a moral or ethical dilemma. The bait here was the woman caught in adultery. The word here, caught, actually can be translated seized, perhaps by force even. The law in Leviticus 20:10 says, the man that commits adultery with another man's wife, even he that committeth adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. However, only the woman here is brought before Jesus. I have actually heard some folks say that perhaps one of the Pharisees enticed the woman into this adulterous situation so they could use her for bait. Again, that's not clear. However, only the woman is brought. She's thrown in front of Jesus between him and the crowd that he was teaching. The Pharisees did not have compassion for the woman. They overlooked the man's involvement, and then finally showed a lack of reverence for the temple by bringing the woman into the very temple complex. And the way we address each other reveals a lot about our attitudes towards another. Same true here. The Jewish leaders referred to Jesus only as teacher. It's not an offensive term, but it's just someone that offers instructions, unlike the terms master or rabbi. So again, diminishing his authority. The leaders, playing to the crowd but speaking to Jesus, introduce the case. They never refer to the woman by name. They don't bring any witnesses, and they don't bring the man that she was caught in adultery with. The leaders show their lack of concern by asking Jesus to pronounce the verdict in the woman's case. They requested a legal judgment when Jesus wasn't in a position in Jerusalem to offer at as a judge. They claim that Moses commanded to stone the woman is only partially correct. The penalty of stoning only applied to a betrothed woman, not married, and both offenders were to be stoned. The leaders here say adultery, for which the penalty would be death, but not specifically by stoning. By asking, "What do you say?" the Pharisees tried to force him to validate their interpretation of the law or to ignore the woman's guilt. They were the experts. They interpreted the law. They taught the law. They applied the law. Their presence here was probably an attempt to intimidate Jesus. John goes on to ask that they ask for Jesus' opinion so that they might have evidence to accuse him. If he agreed to stone her, they call him callous. He might also be in jeopardy of Rome because only capital punishment could only be executed by Rome. If he disagreed, he'd be in conflict with the law. Jesus fell into neither trap. He appears to ignore the leaders, stooping down, writing on the dust on the temple floor. We should be following Paul's admonition in Galatians. Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. Sharon, could you read verses 7 and 8 for me, please?
When they persisted in questioning him, he stood up and said to them, "The one without sin among you should be the
And Bob, could you read verses 9 and 10?
When they heard this, they left one by one, starting with the older man. Only he was left with the woman in the center. When Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? He had no one to condemn you." "No one, Lord," she answered. "Neither do I condemn you," said Jesus. "Go, and from now on, do no sin anymore."
Okay, so here again, they're asking for him to make a judgment. They continue to harass him to make a judgment so they could discredit him in front of the crowds. Finally, Jesus stands up here in response to his accusers, and he does pronounce a verdict. The one without sin should be the one to cast the first stone. This statement completely takes the air out of the leader's argument. He does not deny the guilt of the woman. However, he places, and he also doesn't violate the law of Moses, he places the responsibility of self-examination on the accusers. They were allowed to carry out the sentence, but only if they couldn't be condemned by their own sin. And again, we see Jesus stooping down and writing on the floor. A lot of people have asked, it's like, what was he writing? Some have speculated he was writing the names of the people in the crowd, perhaps writing people's name that they had committed sin with on the floor, or perhaps just even writing the names of sin. We don't know. Bible doesn't tell us. If it's that important, we can ask Jesus when we get there. However, now the leaders start leaving one by one. The older first, then the younger. The Holy Spirit convicted each one. The older may have left first because of their greater sense of guilt or their awareness of sin. The phrase that's used when they heard this indicates it was more of what Jesus said than what he was writing on the floor. So it may have been nothing he was really writing. It could have been doodles. But it was the fact, he that has no sin cast the first stone, that was convicting him. The woman is now left between Jesus and the crowd with no accusers. The listening crowd is still there. Jesus now stands again, not as judge, but as an advocate. He addresses her as woman. And again, a lot in our culture, we perceive that as a negative address. However, this is just a form of address to address an adult female. And he asked her where the accusers are. Jesus knows, but this was likely to make sure the woman knew that there was no one there to accuse her. Jesus states that no one has condemned you. And then he later adds, I don't condemn you. Jesus knew her sin, but she was now without the guilty verdict since the accusing leaders had left. The woman now turns to Jesus and addresses him as Lord, not teacher like the Pharisees has done. She shows respect and considers him as a superior, if not personal master. Again, according to law, she could no longer be put to death because now there's no witnesses. Jesus did not excuse her sin, but tells her to sin no more. He releases her to live in freedom. We can't absolve sin, but we can introduce them to Jesus, who can forgive her sin. John, could you read verse 12 for me, please?
Jesus spoke to them again, I am the light of the world. Anyone who follows me will never walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life. And
again, here Jesus addresses the crowd that was looking on. I'm sure they were very interested what was going to be the next thing he said. You know, he just like put down a challenge by the Pharisees and the scribes. So as they're listening, this event takes place during what is called the Festival of Shelters. And part of the events taking place here is lighting a massive lamp, probably a menorah, in the temple of the Court of Women. And this was a reminder of God's leading the Israelites in the wilderness. So here Jesus makes the declaration that I am the light of the world. He linked himself to God by using the I am statement. I am is how God identified himself to Moses in Exodus. In Exodus 3:14, God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said this to the people of Israel. I am has sent me to you. Yahweh, which is how our Bibles Yahweh, which our Bibles translate either as Lord or God in all capitals, is the I am from Hebrew. Jesus is the light of the world. He, in one sense, exposes sin, hypocrisy, and immorality, but in addition, he also illuminates our path. Psalm 119, 105, thy words are a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. This is the second of the I am statements. We looked at one a couple weeks ago in John 6, I am the bread of life. The third in John 10:7 is I am the door of the sheep. The fourth is I am the good shepherd. The fifth is I am the way, the truth, and the life. And then finally, I am the vine. There is actually an eighth one that is considered in verse 58. Jesus declares that before Abraham was, I am. This is the revelation that Jews actually took up stones to stone him, and he left the temple complex unharmed because it wasn't his time yet. So again, with these different I am statements, he's making it clear to the Jewish followers, the Pharisees, that he is God. Charlie, could you read verses 13 and 14 for me, please?
So the Pharisees said to him, you are testifying about yourself. Your testimony is not valid. Even if I testify about myself, it is lies. My testimony is true, because I know where I came from and where I'm going. But you do not know where I come from or where I'm going.
And again here, some of the religious leaders never left, or they came back at some point. They felt compelled to challenge him again, and they said that he testified about himself. And the Jewish law required 2 or 3 witnesses, and the rabbinical teaching forbid giving testimony about yourself at all. So his claim was invalid. Jesus responds by stating that his testimony is true even if he is testifying about himself. His truth rested in his knowledge of where he came from and where he was going. In comparison, the Pharisees didn't understand his true nature or purpose. The Pharisees, verses 15 through 18, Karen?
You judge by human standards. I judge no one. And if I do judge, my judgment is true, because it is not I alone who judge, but I and the Father who sent me. Even in your law it is written that the testimony of 2 witnesses is true. I am the one who testifies about myself, and the Father who sent me testifies about me.
And again, the Pharisees judged using their own human standards and couldn't comprehend the spiritual matters. Their judgment was faulty because they were faulty. They were sinners. They claimed superior knowledge that gave them the right to judge others. However, Jesus judged no one. Here, judge refers to an evaluation of facts and a condemnation because of guilt. This case shows the difference between Jesus and the Pharisees' approach to judgment. The phrase, judgment is true, means unconcealed or factual, accurate, an accurate contrast to the human standards or conditions of sinful men. Jesus spoke with authority, clarity, and authenticity. Jesus wasn't alone in his judgment. He was one with the Father. The judgment of the Godhead is valid. A second support for his legitimacy rested in his faithfulness to the will of the Father. As a result, Jesus spoke as one with the Father and for the Father. Jesus reminded his opponents that the law affirmed the testimony of two witnesses. Jesus did not think it inappropriate that he was the one testifying about himself, because the Father also testifies me. The repeated references to the Father sending him were crucial. His testimony was valid because as God, he could not lie, and they were in total agreement with the word of the Father. We can also testify with total confidence that Jesus offers forgiveness for our sins. He is the light of the world, illuminating the truth about our sin and his ability to save. He helps us to live in his light through the Holy Spirit. Questions or comments? Okay, we'll be back in 10 minutes for our morning service. Thank you.